country music charts, and the title of the song was Voices, okay? And he sings about how every day he hears these voices from the past, voices that help guide him through his life, voices that help make him the person he had become, and voices that had helped him to make a lot of good choices in life, choices deciding between right and wrong, for example. And he said that these voices were the voices of his grandparents, the voices of his parents, voices of people who helped him to find his way in life. And he said they're very persistent voices. For me, I hear my mother's voice a lot. And let me tell you, she's just as persistent now as she was when she was alive. And these voices are constantly running through your mind. But Chris Young, the singer, says in the song, the words, "But I thank God for them because they made me who I am." And I think each of us could probably relate to this because we all have these kinds of voices in our heads. Some of them encourage us, some of them teach us, some of them inspire us, comfort us, or challenge us, or guide us at different times. And not just parents and grandparents, but maybe a teacher that you had in school, maybe a pastor that counseled with you, friends that are close and that you've confided in, for example. And some of them have provided words of real wisdom that have really helped us. And often...
A spouse?
Yes. Well, you know, one of the things my mother... One of the things my mother used to say to me when I was a teenager, every time I'd leave the house to go somewhere, she'd say, "Remember who you are." Oh, I hated that so much. But I can still hear her saying that. You know, every once in a while I'll go to do something, and it's almost like my mother is standing right next to me. I can hear her say, "Brian?" You know, I don't you know. Well, as Christians, James Moore says we are even further blessed because we have a lot of additional great voices that we hear in our minds that are voices from personalities of the Bible. And he says a lot of times when we're faced with important decisions in life or challenges or times where we need some words of encouragement or whatever, these voices from the Bible come at us and speak to us, make their way into our thoughts. And he says those voices can be very powerful. And they can very definitely affect the way we do things or the way we think about things. And he says we should be grateful for this. So this series of lessons is intended to be a celebration of the voices from the Bible that strengthen us in so many ways. And the way James Moore puts it, I hear voices and I think that's probably a good thing. So we start today with the voice of Jesus. By the way, this first lesson will be from Matthew, but then once we get going after next week, the next 6 or 7 lessons are all from the Old Testament before we get back to the New Testament. But we're starting with the voice of Jesus, who says, "Let your light shine." When somebody mentions the word saint to you, what do you think of?
Your mother. My mother.
Somebody that does really good
Good
things a
things,
lot.
right.
Somebody that does a lot of good things? What else?
I think of a white robe and a beard for some reason.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yes,
White robes and beards?
Will not go away. That's what I think.
I think a saint would be someone who really lives the Christian life. I mean, day by day, minute by minute. And that's why I threw your mother out for that, because she truly did that. I mean, she was a saint, and she would always got furious at me when I said that to her. But it's someone who really lives their Christian beliefs. She wasn't pious, she wasn't judgmental, she just was this absolutely phenomenal woman who
I gotta admit something to you, when somebody says saint, I automatically think somebody's dead.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Okay,
true.
uh-huh.
You know, the saints are, you know, dead, famous
Up there.
Saint
pious
Peter, Saint
folks
Paul,
that-
Saint Matthew.
that made a big name for themselves. Mother Teresa was a saint,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, for example, that kind of thing. So it raises another question then, with all these ideas of saints we have in our mind, how are saints different than normal people? What makes them different?
Service above.
Pardon?
Service above it.
Service above and beyond the call of duty?
Well, aren't Christians supposed to be saints?
We are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just kind of remember hearing that a long time
Well,
ago.
now, let me tell you something, Jay. If we're supposed to be saints,
Yeah.
we have serious problems.
I agree, I'm just saying that.
Where's our
bags
We've
of
heard
gold?
that too, haven't
And
we?
then, yeah, and the name of the Mormon
Well,
Church is
the,
Latter-day Saints,
Yeah,
and it's supposed to be all of them.
yeah.
Yeah, but the apostles were saints, for example.
Well, yeah, they're all
They didn't start
above
out,
and beyond the call of duty. They're all dead. They must qualify for sainthood.
well, they carried the cross their whole lives after they got taught, spoken to.
You know, this is really interesting, and pardon my negativity, but in the last week we've heard about protecting Pope John past to sainthood just because he had a female friend. So there's more than one angle to this
Oh,
sainthood.
there's all kinds of definitions.
But I think we associate saints with the Catholic Church, and I don't think they have the monopoly on saints
No,
because they
no.
died and were a good Roman Catholic. I mean, that's a wonderful thing, and most of them were, but I think we tend to think of a saint as someone that has to go through this process of other people deciding
Right.
whether they're saints or
And
not.
I don't really think the other people have anything to do
No.
with
I
it.
don't either. I think it's just a matter of protocol, and, you know,
Mhm.
it takes
Well,
years.
This is what we're going to talk about today, connecting the concept of saints with the words of Jesus saying, "Let your light shine." And as you might guess, there is a connection, okay?
Before you were gonna make one
I
anyway.
think we'll make one if there isn't otherwise.
Okay, David, you could go.
Our scripture reference for today comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16, where Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." Jesus states that as long as he is in the world, he is the light of the world. But then, he commanded his followers to be lights unto the world themselves. In other words, Jesus commands his followers to be like him. Now, this expression would strike a chord with any Jew, because as we even talked about in Revelation, Jerusalem was to become a light unto the world. The God of Israel was to become a light unto all peoples. Jerusalem was to become the city of light for all the world to follow. For Christians, we are to be God's light unto the world. It's not that we produce the light ourselves, okay? It's a borrowed light that we get that enables us to shine with the reflection of God's light. Well, using this expression, the light of the world, or be a light unto the world, I think we can conclude three things. First of all, a light is meant to be seen. There's no point in lighting a light and then covering it up. That defeats the whole purpose of it. So there is no such thing as secret discipleship. That's like covering up the light, right? And so a person's Christianity should be something that's perfectly visible to everybody. Not something that you would hide and not allow to come out as you go through your life. Second of all, I think we can assume that a light is also used as a guide, marking the way, lighting the pathway,
And to show the way.
or to show the way. And this is another thing Christians are expected to do. We're supposed to be able to show the correct way for other people to follow, of necessity to be an example.
Bless you.
I mean, someone has always needed to light the way or to lead, to take a stand, to have the courage to be a guiding light, however you want to state it. And so that would be the second thing. And then third, a light is also often used as a warning, okay? Telling somebody to stop when there's danger ahead. And I think that applies in this case too. Christians are expected to warn, make necessary warnings to something that's very difficult to do sometimes, by the way. If not, a person might come to say something like this: well, I would never have ended up in this situation if only someone would have spoken up and warned me about it. Right, well, that's part of the job. So this expression that Jesus uses of being a light, I think, has all of those elements involved in it.
Are you describing discipleship?
Absolutely.
So are disciples saints?
We're going to find out, aren't we?
Sorry.
I would venture to say that not only were the disciples saints, but that followers of Jesus are saints, and there are saints in this room.
That's my point.
Yes, okay. The light allows others to see your good works and give God glory. See, people are to see our good deeds, which must be attractive and pleasant. Sometimes Christians tragically perform good deeds with a lot of harshness, a lot of coldness, and a lot of austerity.
Or
Even
resentment.
anger.
Or resentment.
Even anger,
Resentment,
yes.
yeah, that's better. Resentment's a better
Judgmentalism.
word.
Arrogance, all kinds of nasty things. And you know what? That's not the kind of goodness that attracts. That's the kind of goodness that repels people and runs them off. Our deeds must also draw attention to God, not to ourselves. There's a lot of people who have a problem with that. They do all their goody two-shoes stuff, and the whole purpose of it is to make people think that they're so goody two-shoes.
They have another
They're so great.
jewel
So-
in their crown.
Yes. So we're not to be thinking of the praise and the thanks and the prestige that we can get from our good deeds, but how they focus attention on God. Well, here's a thought for you. Who on earth wants to be a saint these days? Who in the world wants to be a saint today? I mean, in this kind of a world,
You have to be, though.
all you do when you try to be a saint is to put a target on your chest for people to take shots at you. Besides,
That's part of the problem.
that's part of the problem.
If you work out, do things to be a saint, you ain't being a saint.
That's right, yeah.
And there's also the flip side of that coin is if there are things that you're doing to be a saint, you may be being the wrong kind of saint. The word saint itself calls to mind all kinds of, well, let's face it, unreal people, maybe pictured in a stained glass window in a church somewhere, maybe on a page of scripture, somebody that we mentioned been dead for a long time, that's still famous, you know, those kind of things.
Maybe in a TV when you choose the wrong channel.
Or it could be, or, you know, doesn't a saint mean a really pious, holy person?
No.
Isn't that what a saint is supposed to be? Who wants to be seen like that?
That's a Pharisee.
Yeah, well, they were far from being saints, believe
No,
me.
but they'd like to
They
show
thought they
off.
were, yeah.
But
thought
they were seen as pious, holy people.
I mean, I don't want to be seen as a pious, holy person. Come on, I mean, if you want to know the truth, I feel a lot more comfortable describing myself by saying, hey, I'm no saint.
Why, boy?
No, I'm no saint. Why are you looking at me like I'm some sort of religious person? Okay? One man said, my wife may not be a saint, but she is an angel.
Oh.
Aww.
She must be an angel because she's always up in the air harping on my faults. And she complains that she never has an earthly thing to wear.
Oh.
You hooked 4 of them on that one, Brian.
Listen, the first Sunday I came to this church, Bruce was speaking and he called his wife an angel.
Yes,
and
I'll
I
never forget
remember
that.
that.
You remember that?
I'll be happy to remind you anytime you want me to.
That
you,
was
Shay.
the same day she got up early and made his breakfast.
Oh.
There was a little boy who was caught by his mom, and he was stealing forbidden cookies out of the cookie jar. And his mother said, "Oh, Tommy, how could you? Only last night I heard you praying that you wanted to become a saint. Don't you remember that?" "Yes, I do," said Tommy, "I remember, but I wanted it to be only after I was dead." See, well, must be okay to be a saint, right? Is that all right to be a saint?
Yes.
You know what? Not right now. You know, not today. I mean, let's face it, I got too many parties I want to go to. You know, I have a lot of fun and crazy stuff I want to do. Some of it's kind of, you know, off the edge.
Unsaintly.
Besides, I don't want to be a stuffed shirt. I don't want to be some pious monk. You know, to tell you the truth, saintliness is just not my thing.
Wasn't that Augustine?
I don't know, was it?
I believe he was the young man raised, and even as he was writing, so that the other behaviors would come later.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, Will Rogers made a comment on his visit to Rome. He said he found it extremely interesting that everybody wants to see where St. Peter is buried, but nobody wants to live like St. Peter.
That's right.
And that pretty well says it for most of us, right? You might say that the word saint is a good word that's gone wrong. Okay? The word was used frequently by the Apostle Paul, but it never, ever meant pious. It never meant sanctimonious or puritanical or anything like that at all. There was nothing unreal or pious about the saints in Rome or Corinth or Philippi or any of those churches. And they weren't dead people either, by the way. They were very much alive, and in some cases, a lot more lively than Paul really wanted them to be. In fact, after calling these folks saints, Paul then often also scolded them for being very unsaintly in their behaviors. So, yes, we are called to be saints in this world, but we would be well advised if we were to redefine, perhaps, or re-understand what the word saint really means. James Moore says that in his opinion, a saint is a person who makes goodness attractive and who has a radiant, attractive, contagious commitment to God. A true saint is not someone who turns you off spiritually, but who makes goodness attractive. Not a prudish, pietistic, holier-than-thou person that you can't stand to be around, but someone who is so appealing, so magnetic, that you wish you could be more like them. That's a saint. It's a matter of letting your light shine in such a way that others can see the beauty of what you have done and then give God the credit for it. Well, James says there's 4 things that a saint is. First of all, a saint is one who makes it easy for others to believe in God. The surest evidence that we have in the world today that God exists is a committed Christian. Think about that. The best argument for the faith is a person who really lives it. When you see an act of kindness, you feel compelled to perform an act of kindness in turn. Right? There's even a good movie out on that.
No, it's called Play It Forward now, though, you know, the
Yeah.
kindness stuff, Play It
Here's a
Forward.
story about Dr. Van Bogart Dunn. James Moore says with a name like that, you'd have to be a saint.
I thought the same thing.
He was a little bit of both a saint and a fighter. Bogart Dunn influenced his life a lot as a pastor and later as the dean of the seminary he attended. He was so committed that when James was in his presence, he said, I found it easier to believe. He made goodness and faith challenging and exciting and special. Well, he says, well, in seminary, I accompanied him on some recruiting trips. And he says they would visit colleges and tell them about the school, the seminary. He would speak as the dean, and James Moore would speak as a student. And on one occasion, he said they visited a college in Birmingham, Alabama. When we arrived, he said we were exhausted, having been on the road for 3 or 4 days. We had driven all night with no sleep. We had talked with students and faculty members all day and into the night. Our schedule was so full that we had no time to eat. About 9:30 that night, we finally finished up and headed for the hotel. We were hungry, physically tired, mentally and emotionally wrung out. And then he said, to make matters worse, it was pouring rain. And he said, all I had on my mind was food and sleep. And as he walked through the drizzle down the sidewalk toward the hotel in Birmingham, he suddenly realized that he was all by himself. He turned around and looked. Dr. Dunn had disappeared. Well, he turned around and saw him about 15 yards back, kneeling down on the sidewalk, talking to a little boy who was leaning against the light pole. The little boy, who looked to be about 8, 9 years old, was crying. I had been so tired, James says, that I had walked right past the little guy. But Dr. Bogart Dunn had seen him and heard him crying, and he had stopped to find out what his trouble was. The boy said, my father sent me to the corner of the grocery to get some things. He said, I have the list, but I lost the money. And he said, I'm afraid to go home because my dad will beat me. Dr. Dunn took the boy by the hand, and together the three of us walked to the corner store where Dr. Dunn paid for the little boy's groceries. The boy took the sack of groceries and ran hurriedly off down the street, and then suddenly he stopped. And he came back and he said to Mr. Dunn, Mister, I don't know who you are, but I sure do wish you were my daddy.
Oh.
James Moore says that after that experience, he forgot all about being tired and hungry, and said he spent the next 2 hours walking all over Birmingham trying to find somebody he could be kind to and help. That's a saint. A true saint is not nauseatingly pious, but one who inspires and challenges us, who brings out the best in us. It's a person who makes goodness attractive and makes it easier for us to believe in God. And we see this, by the way, most clearly in Jesus himself. I mean, it was because of his influence Simon Peter became a rock. It was because of Jesus that Mary Magdalene became a woman of faith. It was because of Jesus that James was transformed into the one who gave everything, including his life. We profess to be Christians. Others are paying attention to what we do and how we act and what we say, and they're taking notes on all this mentally. Do other people believe in God because of the way we influence them and because of what we do? The second thing is a saint is somebody who believes the best things in the worst times. It's a matter of being faithful under pressure. Huh?
I failed that one.
Yeah. It's a matter of being faithful under pressure, being spiritually tenacious. Does that ring a bell? Keep on believing even when it's difficult to believe. That takes a saint. You'll notice that this time I have not cut out the stories. I'm just reading them. I knew that that was upsetting to you, so I won't do it.
I was thinking about the fact that normally what you do is you tag the label of saint on someone's, when their body of work is done.
Instead of
not
now,
during, not
instead
during.
of here and now, it's then, after, yeah.
And then saints, what I consider a saint is a missionary in Africa.
Right, right.
And they'll come and go and may not ever be regarded as a saint.
Yeah, well,
except
some of
for
them
the
are saints
people in
too.
Africa.
Some of them are saints too.
Yeah,
Maybe not all of them.
yeah, but they're there.
Well, Harry Emerson Fosdick told a story that came out of the Armenian atrocities of the 1940s. There was a young woman and her brother who were chased into an alley by a Turkish soldier. They were trapped. The sister watched as the soldier brutally murdered her brother. She was horrified and scared and heartbroken, but she was able to scramble over a wall and escape. A few days later, however, she was captured by the Turks, and since she was by profession a nurse, she was forced to work in a military hospital. One day into her ward and under her care was brought the same Turkish soldier who had killed her brother.
Oh my goodness.
He was deathly ill. They recognized each other immediately. The slightest inattention to his care would have quickly brought on the soldier's death. What would you do?
Boy, that's a hard one.
The young
Yeah.
nurse told later of the bitter struggle that took place within her. One part of her cried, "Vengeance. He killed your brother, get even. This is your chance. It would be so easy, nobody would ever know." But the voice of Jesus, the voice of Jesus' teachings had kept running through her head. Love, forgive, be merciful. And the voice of Jesus won the day. She conscientiously nursed the soldier back to health. Later, the soldier, unable to restrain his curiosity, asked the young nurse, "Why? Why'd you do that? You recognized me, I know you did. Why didn't you just let me die?" And she answered, "I'm a follower of him who said, love your enemies and do them good." The soldier was silent for a long time, and then he said, "I never knew that there was such a religion. If that is your religion, tell me more about it. I want it." Folks, that's a saint. What God, third, what a saint does is ordinary things in very extraordinary ways. What God looks for and needs are not extraordinary people. We can't all be Mother Teresa's, in other words. But He looks for ordinary people like you and like me who just do ordinary things, but we do them in very extraordinary ways. Okay? Got another one for you. Pop Sandlin. He touched the lives of a lot of young people. He was a youth counselor in James Moore's church in Memphis. He couldn't have preached a sermon for anything. He couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. Couldn't teach class, couldn't lead a public prayer, didn't know how to teach Sunday school. But he was a genuine, and you knew immediately, a very genuine person. He loved God, he loved the church, he really cared for young people. What he did, really, every Sunday night, since he was really good at making great hamburgers, he came to the church and cooked hamburgers for the kids and drove them to and from church. And one day he gave a poem that he had written to James Moore. It goes like this. He couldn't speak before a crowd. He couldn't teach a class. But when he came to Sunday school, he brought the folks en masse. He couldn't sing to save his life. In public, he couldn't pray. But always his jalopy was just crammed on each Lord's day. And though he couldn't sing nor teach, nor even lead in prayer, he listened well, he had a smile, and he was always there. With all the others whom he brought, who lived near and far, and God's work was greatly prospered, for he had a consecrated car. The church becomes paralyzed not so much by the lack of people who can do great things, but by the unwillingness of ordinary people to do little things. That's where paralysis hits us. And those of us who have been really active in the church understand that, don't we, Pat? Bruce, Dave, all of you.
This is the not so busy side.
Wait a
Oh
minute.
no, we're all contributors. Finally, a saint is one who loves even the unlovable. A woman who was a shut-in wrote a letter to the church to say that their televised worship services were a ray of sunshine in her very dismal life. And James Moore says, being a shut-in is bad. Being shut out is even worse. Love means acceptance, inclusion, belonging, and that applies to the outcast and the unlovable. And that is, in fact, Christ-like love. This has saved me a lot of cutting and clipping. In his book, The Miracle of Love, Charles Allen tells the story about a little girl showing a man her dolls. She had lots of dolls of all shapes and sizes and kinds. And the man said to her, "Tell me, which one of those is your very favorite doll?" The little girl kind of hesitated for a minute, and she said, "You promise you won't laugh if I show you my favorite doll?" The man promised. He said, "No, I won't laugh." So the little girl ran out of the room, and a moment later she returned, and in her hands she held an old, dirty, tattered, dilapidated doll. I mean, some of its hair had fallen out. Its nose was broken, its cheeks were all scratched up, and there was an arm and a leg missing. And the man said to her, he said, why do you like this doll the best?" And the little girl said, "I love her most because I'm afraid if I didn't love her, no one else would."
Aww.
See, that's a beautiful little story. A saint is someone who loves even the unlovable. Who wants to be a saint in the world today? Well, we should all want to be, if we understand what a saint really is. It's the voice of Jesus we keep hearing saying, "Let your light shine so that others can see your good works and give glory to God." That's going to be it for today. When we get back together 2 weeks from now, okay, I hear the voice of Abraham saying, "Let there be no strife between you and I."
That was good, I like that.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that lesson.
Yeah.
And we will be back into Genesis.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.